I'm super excited to have you on my very first podcast. The podcast is called 1% Club, and it has absolutely nothing to do with finances. It is solely to do with the way that people think and can they be in the 1% Club.
Yeah.
And, this has been something that's kind of special to me and kind of how I got through my life is being, in that 1% and learning the mentality that's needed to get through a bunch of things in life. So I'm really excited to have you on my first official podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, by the way, for inviting me.
Absolutely. So this is Dr. Mark Guadagnoli. He's a professor of neuroscience, PhD graduate from Auburn University. Did some time at Harvard and ultimately ended up at UNLV, which, he was my professor and then also my graduate advisor and mentor. So reconnecting after 10 years is pretty special to me. He's also the dean of the UNLV Medical School as well. And he's appeared in Time Magazine, CBS Sports, Wall Street Journal, and many other news outlets. And he's worked with the most elite of the elites, elite sports athletes, elite business entrepreneurs, billionaires. Can you share a little bit about exactly what you do?
Yeah, so thank you again for having me on. Dean of faculty, by the way. So there's the big dean is there as well.
Okay.
I'm one of the deanlets. I work with people who want to get better at whatever they do. And so, like you said, sometimes that's corporate, sometimes that's medicine, sometimes that's athletes. Really anybody who has the ability and the drive to get better, love to work with people like that.
I love that. Incredible. Have you always been academic minded?
This is a long no. No, really, I was probably, I don't know if we have time, but I can tell the story if you want, but I was probably a sophomore, junior in college when I had gotten injured in sports, and I had nothing to do, so I decided to go to class. And the teacher tells this story. This is still to this day hilarious to me. I'm sitting in the front row because I was on crutches, right? And so the front row is the last one to fill up. So I go sit in the front row, and the teacher's talking about something. I have no idea. This is like a anatomy class. I don't know why I'm in this class and so forth. But I remember very distinctly him saying, and the renal system of a kangaroo rat is so refined that when it urinates in the summer, the urine will crystallize before it hits the ground. And I, out loud, without doing it on purpose, I said, "What?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow.
And the teacher's like, "Yes, this is true." And he tells this whole story. I'm like, this is amazing. I don't know why a kangaroo rat peeing was interesting to me, but it can't go very far, right? Between,
of course, they're tiny.
Yeah.
and it crystallizes. So I go home, I open up, I actually cut the plastic off of the book that I was supposed to have for this class, open it up and read through this whole chapter on renal physiology, and I can't find this kangaroo rat story anywhere in there. And so I went back to class, the next class, hoping to hear more about this kangaroo rat. And for some reason, I really don't know why, but that just was like, this learning stuff is super cool. And that sort of launched me.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's crazy to me how, little things make such a big difference in your life. And you don't even know it necessarily at the time. So I've been super fortunate, to be able to compete in athletics, compete in academics and so forth, and mostly dumb luck through, most of it. But, it's gotten me to where I am now.
No, I think that's amazing. And speaking of little things, I do remember, doing some of your most famous work, the Challenge Point Framework. And I remember doing that almost 10 or 11 years ago as a student. Can you please explain that, what your philosophy was on teaching that? And maybe at the time I didn't know how important it was, but I would vividly remember going through these things every time I had a hardship. I'd draw the circles and I'd be, what am I in control of? What am I not in control of? And I'm like, oh my God. I said, if I knew how important that was, that I would take pictures of everything. But off tangent, I kind of mastered the art of going to some classes and not going to some classes because I was almost double majoring, but I never missed your kinesiology class. Swear to God. Because I got something truly out of it every single time. I just didn't know what it was, but I didn't want to miss that. It was the first time I've almost felt like I was getting mentored in the right way. And fast forward 10 years now, everyone is a quote unquote mental performance coach and a motivational speaker. And I never wanted my podcast to turn into what everyone else is doing. In fact, if no one listens, I don't care. But I always wanted to, make mine unique. And it has roots. And if you could just share maybe from the scientific way of how you approach things, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so challenge point, I appreciate you saying that. And I got to tell you, you said thank you for me being on the podcast, but I can't even begin to tell you how cool it is that a former student of mine wants to hang out with me.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
So I appreciate it. This is super cool to be with both of you.
Thank you.
Challenge point framework is something where I don't tell this story very often, but I was sitting on my balcony one day having a martini, and I remember this just like it was yesterday. Crisp martini on a summer day, lemon twist, just enjoying myself. And this little kid is riding. His balcony was on the second floor, and this little kid is riding a bicycle. And I may have told you this in not the martini part, but the rest of the story in class. This kid's riding, and he has training wheels on his bike. Okay. And he couldn't fall over if he tried, right? And he's pedaling and steering and so forth. And I'm thinking, that's sad to me, because what's going to happen is he's going to go tell his parents, hey, I can ride my bike, take the training wheels off, and he's just going to be a scab for the next month, right? Yeah. Because he hasn't factored balance into it.
Right.
And I thought, why wouldn't they make training wheels that they could slowly raise up, so as soon as he's ready for more challenge, he can have more challenge, right? More balance, and then finally he take them off and he's good to go. And so weirdly, in this conversation that I was having with myself, I started thinking about this problem that had perplexed the field of, at the time, psychomotor kinesiology for a couple hundred years. And the problem was this: in some cases, you could practice under a certain way. Like there's a practice called blocked and random practice. Blocked being same thing over and over again. Right. Random, to multiple different targets or multiple things. Randomized, right? In some cases, blocked practice was better, and in some cases, random practice was better, and these two camps would fight at each other. But it wasn't just blocked and random. It was types of feedback and whether you teach things as a parts of a whole or the whole thing. There were all these different things that seemed to have very little to do with each other. Watching that kid made me think, the thing that we're missing in all of this is the complexity of the task, riding a bike, and the level of performer.
Yes.
And so if we can put these things together, we can create a formula to optimize learning. And so the challenge point became that, which now, interestingly, has become a universal theory for optimized learning, which is kind of crazy to me to think about that. But what happens is, if you practice a particular way that we can talk about, as if you'd like, you learn 3 or 4 times faster than the way people normally practice. And this would be practicing a sports skill, music, learning biology, whatever, learning about kangaroo rats, whatever it is, right? And that learning is stress resistant, which means when you're under pressure, then you can still perform. Absolutely. This is why athletes love it. This is why trauma surgeons love it. This is why a lot of people that are high performance performers in whatever they do, they love this, because they don't just practice and then fail during the competition. Okay. They actually succeed. And in fact, they come into the competition with a lot more confidence as well. But the part that makes it universal is that it scales to the individual. So this is framework has been studied, probably 200 plus research articles.
Okay.
Not all mine. I mean, people all over the world. And what happens over and over again, so this is with people that have Parkinson's disease, elite athletes, college students, older adults. I mean, and it always scales
Yes.
to the individual. And so it works for everybody basically, which is crazy.
Okay.
And it's really simple. And what it comes down to, if you challenge people in an intelligent way so that they struggle during practice, you're kicking in this whole cascade of biochemicals that automatically require the brain to learn this information and retain it under stress.
You just jog my memory, practice to learn, play
Play
to
to
win.
win. That's right. That's exactly right.
Practice to learn. By the way, I like that. Yeah.
The title of not the first book, but the first decent book that I wrote. And there's a great quote from a guy named Suvorov, General Suvorov from Russia from a couple hundred years ago, and he said, "Easy preparation, hard war. Hard preparation, easy war." And the thing about it is, it's not, and this becomes really important, it's not just working harder. I mean, you could say working smarter, but what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
So to be very specific, if you are working at a level that you're successful roughly 65 to 70% of the time, which means you're failing 30 to 35% of the time,
Okay.
you're probably optimizing your practice.
Okay.
Most people don't do that, right? Most people practice, and usually without knowing it, most people practice to look good during practice and to fail in competition.
Absolutely. And that brings me to a question. Challenge point framework for an adult, because I see this all the time. What happens when the adult hasn't built up their challenge point framework in their practice, and then something happens in their life, and then all of the tendencies they had in their childhood, all of a sudden they bear down on them, and it's like that person just becomes suddenly lost. It's they spiral out of control, and then I feel like they just give up.
So I'll tell you why I love this question. First of all, I don't entirely know the answer, so it's a super cool question to think through. But secondly, you're applying challenge point way beyond the original way that it was created, and I've been doing that lately, and it's really interesting because you asked about how challenge point impacts my training with corporate coaching or all kinds of different things. And it bleeds over into so many places in life. So essentially what you're talking about is a situation where at a very fundamental level, that person gets into a panic zone. And when we get into a panic zone, we revert back to as much safety as we can. And safety is not necessarily safe, it's familiar.
Yeah, because comfort kills. They just want to put a blanket on and stay warm instead of taking the layers and really diving deep.
Yeah, I mean this is a huge and wonderful topic because we have to allow people, and in fact even push people to fail to a certain extent. So when they fail later, because they will, they know how to get back up, right? Mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever it happens to be. And one of the big disservices we can do, and I think it happens more and more in today's world than anywhere, is we protect people from failing.
Yeah.
And in the short run, that's comforting, like you say, it's the comforting blanket. In the long run, short term, it is very detrimental because what it ends up doing is it creates enormous failure later, right?
I know for me, I was protecting myself from failing, so I became so competitive where I was obsessed with competing with everyone else instead of competing with myself. And and that kind of led me to feeling like my freedom was getting robbed from me. And it wasn't until we spoke, that last week that really set in, and I've been thinking about it ever since. That was just a sign that I still have a lot more work that I can do. and I didn't like that because I thought I had done all the work. I thought I was, invincible mentally. And but now I see that though I'm grateful for that. I have gratitude towards that, and now I'm mature enough to learn. Okay, let's break it down. Like, why am I doing these things? What do I need to learn? How do I get better doing that? And the old me would just try to bulldoze over everything, but that actually creates a failure, not sudden and not in 1 year, but in 5 years you crash and burn into a hole. And you look up and like, where is my life? So that's kind of what I want to prevent now, and I feel like that's what people really struggle on doing, is because they can't be honest with themselves. They want to, their honesty is what they want someone else to think about them. I want to be honest as if I were alone in the public.
How do you, sorry to interrupt you, how do you start this with your patients? Like, is it a series of questions you ask first? How do you take a patient in, let's say I want to do this, how would I begin this process? What is, I guess, the framework?
Yeah, so, we start with what's called the personal legend document. And that personal legend comes from one of my favorite books called The Alchemist. And that really, The Alchemist was important to me for a variety of reasons, but I hope that this is true. I feel like I'm an alchemist of human performance. And what I mean by that is I will take whatever I can find to create gold in somebody. And so it can come from neuroscience, it can come from philosophy, it can come from biology. It doesn't matter to me where it comes from, as long as it's real. So it's legitimate information, science.
Okay.
And then we can apply it in a way to help people. So that's why really this document became known as the personal legend document.
Okay.
It's the one that Sean was talking about that he went through. And
it was quite challenging, right, Sean? You said you were kind of surprised because
you
got to like the first question.
He left the room and the first box came up, and I was pissed because I knew that I should be able to answer this, and I couldn't find any joy or happiness from being a kid, from being in middle school to being in high school, and everything was based on, you work hard so you buy a car, then you work hard, then you buy a house, then you get married, then you open up a business. So
you did you know the answers and they were painful to write down, or it just kind of made you reflect and realize I
think
I haven't dug this
subconsciously,
deep.
but what I should have wrote on there was, and then we discussed this, is finding joy in the unpleasant times, finding joy in the hardship. Because happiness is so momentarily. It could be 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You accomplished something, great. Now you're on to the next thing. But where is the actual joy?
Yeah.
Sure. And I think that's what I struggle with, and I'm sure many other people, that also they struggle with that as well.
Yeah. Ironically, a lot of the high achievers struggle with joy.
Yes.
Right. And rewarding themselves and giving themselves grace, which, by the way, I'm going to do right now. You said you should have done this and you should have done that. You did what you did based on the information that you had, and what you had learned in your life was functional and worked for you. And it did, right? Because you had risen to a certain level. But those same things that are functional at one level are the ones that hold you back from the next level, right? So I'm going to sort of bastardize this phrase. Part of it's very famous, and the part that's famous is comparison is the thief of joy. It also happens to be the driver of progress. And so when it's only comparison that drives you, it steals your joy. But
Absolutely.
You can achieve things, right? But not in a way that you're joyous about it.
Yes.
And I think that's one that to be clear, I'm not preaching to anybody. Like, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. But I do think that one of the things, especially, as we become more mature in aspects of our life, if we can start creating more moments of joy, man, it changes life.
Absolutely.
And it changes the struggle into something, like, I think struggle is inevitable in life. Suffering is not.
Correct.
Right? And so I think when we start looking at things like everything is an opportunity, everything is our advantage, everything is something that we can learn from, everything is an opportunity for joy. It changes everything, right? Same circumstance, completely different viewpoint.
Absolutely. And that kind of reminds me about when you used to teach about the carrot and the stick approach. Could you verbalize on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Carrot, I will tell you an interesting addendum to this. So carrot and the stick is something that's, relatively common. You've got a service animal like a mule or something. How are you going to motivate that service animal to move forward and do what it's supposed to do? Do you put a carrot out in front of it so it tries to achieve it, or do you use a stick so you whip it when it won't do your work, right? And there are some of us that respond better to the carrot and some respond better to the stick. I'm horrible.
Or the pain, right?
Yeah, right. If I'm great with carrots, I'm not good at all with sticks. If
and that's interesting. I live with the stick. Put me in the pain, because I can endure. But that also has its negative connotations as well.
The problem with that, really starts. I mean, we see this in a really practical way because it starts creating burnout.
Yes.
And it becomes a negative cycle of negative. You start to look at negative, and you see negative, and you see what you look for, and so you see more negative, and there you go. And that's why you see people who, we look at them and we're like, dude, you got all of this? Why are you depressed?
Yeah. Crazy, right?
Right?
Yeah.
But they've worked themselves into that.
Which is interesting because in the same way too, I was just having this conversation the other day, I think pain and hurt and that aloneness drives me more too. And sometimes you feel like you're not deserving of love or certain things that you've just built this in your head, and it's like, so again, I was having a conversation last night too, and I was asking my partner, I said, what makes you happy? She really couldn't answer that, and it was maybe different chapters of our life, and I was asking the same thing, she was asking the same thing. I said, I don't know. Obviously work makes me happy. These conversations be more real, because I think you do see a lot of the negative and a lot of the BS, if you will, and it kind of it puts you in a negative place because you automatically think this relationship's going to end because of this, or what you see on social media, because again, you see everything perfect on the outside, and we really start to peel the layers and you start to meet people, you start to realize this is a bad person, or this is really not, or I'm getting complete BS from this person. So finding real in people is nice, and is a good change. So I'm excited to try this exercise though too, because I want to dig a little deeper and kind of see. And because a lot of things too is if you're honest with yourself, and if you can answer those questions, that's good. And putting it down on paper for yourself is a good motivator to kind of move you forward.
It's an exercise that builds on top of itself, and I believe very firmly that if we have a clear understanding of what our values are, we make consistently good decisions. And there's two parts to that, right? They're good and they're consistent. And we make them more quickly, because the way that we do this personal legend document, you actually preload a lot of your decisions. So I'll give you an example of this. One of my values is choose healthy. So I learned this back in the day. I used to work at Zappos, and Tony Shea, who probably a lot of people know, it was an absolute zealot as far as his values were concerned. It's unbelievable the things that I learned from him. But one of them was that you don't say healthy, be healthy, or choose healthy, or do healthy, or whatever you want, because that's a call to action, right? And so now, sometimes that's something simple, right? The waiter comes up and says, hey, would you like fruit or fries with that? Okay, choose healthy, give me fruit, please.
Yep. Okay.
But sometimes it's more subtle. You walk into a conversation and you hear people just bitching and moaning about something. Well, choose healthy means I've got a choice. I can either change this conversation or I can walk away. Both of those are healthy choices, including, by the way, the conversation I'm having in my own head that's going on, right? And so that tells me what I'm supposed to do. It's preloaded my decisions. Now, I'm not perfect about it, but if I have that in the back of my mind, it certainly moves me in the right direction. If I have no idea what my values are, what I stand for,
Yeah.
I'm going to be all over the place.
Absolutely.
Rallies is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And big on the parents too, right? I mean, luckily, sometimes people that are raised, single parent or no parents, it's harder too but having good parents or bad parents, I guess, but Valleys is a big part of it. I can see that for sure making a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What neuroscience principles do you specifically apply to enhance entrepreneurial performance and decision making?
Interestingly, I would say most of the principles around cognitive science in general, right? And so neuroscience fits within that. A lot of it is around communication to self, communication to others, because communication to me, and feedback in particular. Mm-hmm. Okay, so dancing, cooking, and sex. These are all things that people think they're good at, but probably aren't.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And feedback is one of those as well. We think we can communicate well, we think we can, and probably we're not as good as we think we are, right? And so a little bit of lessons in this can be really helpful. Mm-hmm. Well, just saying, oh, you should think positively or you should do that, when you can add the neuroscience to it or the cognitive science and say, here's why, here's what's happening. And in particular, for example, there's an area of our brain called the default mode network. I think you both know about this. And the short version of it is that it's a cluster of neurons, a neural network, that is our default for so many things in life. Things like when I see somebody that I don't know, I default into an opinion about that person based on my previous experiences, right? When we've got a red light activity for you, when we come up to a red light, I default into getting upset because there's a red light. Or if I've trained myself, I default into thinking, oh, how cool, I get a moment of gratitude, right? So anyway, the point is that we default into these, right?
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that happens is we can tune that default mode network to some extent by our attitude. Okay, so I come in today and I'm super excited about doing a podcast with you guys. Well, so now my default is excitement and looking for fun things and looking for joy in this situation and so forth. Or I'm really nervous, or I'm pissed off because I don't want to do this, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
It tunes that default a little bit, and I start seeing things in a certain different way depending on how I've chosen to tune it. Okay, that's more important than just say, hey, have a positive attitude, right? Because most of the people, in fact, almost all the people that I work with, they want to know why. Like, I'm not just, hey, you need to do this. Why do I need to do this?
Right.
Okay, let's talk about this. Talk about it from a behavioral perspective, from a cognitive perspective, from a neurochemistry perspective. Where do you want to go? And let's talk about that. And I don't blame them. To your point, there are so many people who profess, that they're experts in so many different areas.
Yes.
Who do you know who to trust?
Yeah, and
right?
that brings up a topic is what makes your coaching so unique and customizable to the client.
So it's an interesting question to me because I actually, first of all, I've never thought about it so much. What I have thought about is how can I serve this person best?
That's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
And
That's what we think.
I have been fortunate to go to different coaching programs, Stanford Med School's coaching program, Harvard Med School's coaching programs. So I get to see how different people coach, and it's really interesting. There's something you can learn from any of these programs. A lot of really good things.
Absolutely.
There's a one that I just learned about recently called narrative coaching. Is super interesting to me. But I think the thing about it is that most people have a way that they do things. I don't so much. I have any way that works.
Wow.
Now,
yeah, that's great.
I will say, I believe in certain things. I believe, like we talked about, values are critically important. Being really honest with yourself, and a lot of times that takes help to do, really important. I think that those kinds of things, and knowing where you want to go, right? At least where you think you want to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I think
those-
the vision is so, like, you got to see it before you can execute it, you know? I think if you ask any, elite, entrepreneur, they've seen it for 1 year, 2 years, 20 years in their mind over and over again. And that allowed them to, I think that's the only way you can think big enough.
I agree. And I mean, I work with golfers a lot, and one of the things that we talk about all the time is if you have a fuzzy target, you're going to hit it, but it could be all over the place.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's high golf.
Yeah, sometimes you could have a really good target and you're still all over the place, but yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing with business. It's the same thing with medicine. One of the things I love about working with medicine is it's a life or death situation. That sounds so obvious, but it's true.
Absolutely.
And it puts in perspective so many of the things that, I'll give you an example. I was at out with a couple friends of mine. One was a trauma surgeon, one was a golfer, both elite in their areas. And the golfer, he'd played professionally, he'd coached, he still coaches collegiate, very good player. And he asked the surgeon, and I love this exchange. He said, when you walk into a trauma room, right? So you've got people whose lives you've got blood all over the place, people whose lives are, hanging in the balance.
High stress.
And he said, do you get nervous? Like, do you get anxious? And the surgeon, I love the way he said this with no arrogance whatsoever. He said, no, because in that moment, I'm the best chance they have to live.
That brings up something that's
pretty badass too.
I would always get like these clients and patients that have been all over the place to get worked on. And I remember, one lady, she was about 7 years old, a lot of things wrong. Actually had a 12 vertebral fusion with a steel rod. Wow. And a lot of neurological stuff. And she was like, are you sure you want to work on me? And she's like, you're not nervous working? And all I said is, someone has to do that. Without hesitation. But in my mind, my skill set and my knowledge and the process of how we're going to deal with what she's got made me confident that I could handle that. Because there was a process that I put into place. I wasn't afraid of something being harder because I'm going to follow the process here. We're going to be able to help her. And if I wasn't, I'm going to know someone that could help her. And that was kind of the first time that happened where someone actually addressed that to me. Because before I was like, I'll work on anyone. I don't care.
Yeah.
Professional athlete, 90 years old, it doesn't matter. Because part of my job is to help anyone, everyone in any way that I can.
Well, and I think the part of what's important in both of those stories is you have practiced your craft, right? It's not like you're just like that commercial, I slept at a Holiday Inn, right? So I'm going to do, no, it's you've practiced your craft and you've practiced it under pressure so that when you get to those situations, then all of a sudden you can perform.
Yeah. And I always laugh when some people go, I got 30 years of experience. And then in my mind's like, well, doing the same thing for 30 years? Because that's not 30 years of experience. And I've always challenged myself just to, once I got good at something, move on to something else that I wasn't good at. And now I do that. So I was a great practitioner. I was a great trainer, but I wasn't a good businessman because I didn't practice that. I'm very fortunate that me working and everything, it continued to grow the business in that fashion. And it brings up to a great question is, how does mental performance help in a high stress work environment? For instance, and this is kind of like a double question, in the corporate world when you're working with a big business, or harder when you're a medium business trying to become a big business, because I feel like that's one of the hardest things to achieve because there's a financial wall there, and there's a learning wall there as well.
True.
So I think this is where athletes have a huge advantage. And not necessarily just athletes, but people who have competed in their lives have a huge advantage because they're used to working hard, getting knocked down, getting back up, moving forward, and so forth. And that's a lot of what happens in this. But you're because the mental fortitude and the resilience is so critically important. There was a time when I was growing up that there's a phrase, brain or brawn, right? Is this
Right.
guy smarter or are they a good athlete, right? And it's a ridiculous dichotomy. Like you can't be a whole human being only developing half of you, right?
True. Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so the ability to put both of those together, I used to say this in class all the time. My dad used to tell me this quote, mens sanus in corporum sano.
Corpus sano.
A sound mind and a sound body. And the thing about it is that, this is one of the reasons why I love coming into the gym, because that's helping to exercise the sound body, obviously. But half of what I'm doing in here is working my mind. Let me tell you what, not even the first time, every time I get in that cold plunge, I'm working my mind, right?
Yeah, that's not joke.
And I start working it before I ever get there. When I get on the assault bike, I know what's at the end of this, and I'm working my mind. Okay, so I get in a situation in business, and it's getting tough. Okay, I've been through that before. I know how to do that. There's actually, interestingly, a part of the brain that gets stronger or weaker when you do things that you don't like doing.
Yeah, that's true.
Damn, I got to use that thing every day.
Yeah. And so I think that this is a longer answer, but there's a process that I work with people called the elite performer cycle. And it is train, compete, recover. And every bit of that, there's a mental component to it. Obviously, there's a physical component, but there's a mental component to it. So again, why would you train half of the machine, right? Why would you train halfway? So things like meditation, I think, are huge, absolutely huge. Here's the thing: nowadays, you can't say something like meditation or physical activity or those kinds of things. They don't do anything. There's so much science out there.
Absolutely, yes.
There's so much science.
Yes,
True.
I'll tell you.
Sleep. I struggle with the sleep part.
Sleep.
Shutting down.
Huberman just did this like 7-part series on sleep because it's so important. The Matthew Walker, who really is sort of the godfather of sleep, has a beautiful book on sleep as well. And there's just, it's so rich in science, but all aspects. Peter Attia, I think, does a phenomenal job. There's so many people who do such a great job to explain this stuff. You've got the information there. So to say, well, I didn't know, that's because you didn't look. And I'm not saying that with judgment. I'm saying it's there for you.
Yeah.
Go look, right? And so anyway, the kind of the long story short is I believe very firmly that you look at both the mental side and the physical side, not as if they're separate, but how they complement each other. And in working with athletes in particular, we talk about this performance formula. Ability minus interference equals performance. So if you have the ability to bench 300 pounds, but you can only bench 280, there's something that's interfering with that. Right? If you have the ability in golf to shoot a 65, but you shoot a 75, the thing you need to work on is not your shot. It's why you had all that interference, right? And so
Brain.
that interference is something, if you can work, and this goes back to your question about challenge point, if you can work on interference and ability at the same time, now you're golden.
And that's the truth. And that's probably why many people, they can achieve their short-term goal, but what does it truly take to achieve the long-term goal? Like if you told me that, business would be like this in 10 years, Sean, but you're going to have to go through X, Y, Z. You're going to get your money taken multiple times. You're going to fail. You're going to get told no. They're going to put you down. You're going to get divorced, or you get in a car accident, die almost from going under anesthesia. And then it's like, what comes next? But during that process, it's like you keep building up, it's not what's on me, it's what's in me. And people didn't, I started realizing that it doesn't matter what I look like, what I'm doing, but it's what's in me. That's when I really started to focus on the mental performance side, because there came to a point where things got so big that my work ethic could no longer sustain the boat to travel. It was just, things were just flowing on there. So I had to depend on what was in me, not what was on me. And that really helped shift my mindset. And then for the first time I said, I'm going to have to remove, and which was hard for me to do, and put some responsibility into others, which required me to have faith in what they were going to do. And that took a while for me to understand. And now that's just how it has to be. So from that leadership position, if you're going to sit up there, you really need to act like it physically and mentally, because you're like the role model for everyone, and they're going to watch and see as you do. So if something wasn't going right, go look in the mirror, because that's why it's not going right. And it took me a second. That made me be able to be really honest with myself. So, back to that question is, what really helps people sustain their long-term goals?
Well, I think a lot of it is what you just said. So the resilience of it. So having a very clear vision, right? What's my target? Where do I want to go? Having a very clear sense of who you are and what you value. So your values at your core, right? And then, and this part we haven't talked about, but it's important. And then it's the system. What habits and rituals do you have in place that are going to help you get to where you are?
Yeah.
And in habits, most people think about habits as physical things, and they are, but they're also the way that you think.
Yes.
Yeah, the internal dialogue, right?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think I had a system until 33 years old, which is how old I am now. And that's what I failed on. But now that I realize that, creating the system in business where there's no leaks in the ship, like you're building from the foundation up. So I realized I'll take longer to grow the foundation of my business, because it won't crumble. You'll fall down a step, not crumble your building. But I learned that, and it took me 33 years.
Well,
because and it kind of was forced upon me, like something tragic in my life needed to happen in order to wake up something that was inside, almost like an illumination.
Most of the greatest things in our lives are forced on us, right? I was telling you this the other day. I don't know, Rob, if I told you the story, but I had gotten injured this year. One of my focuses was to create freedom. And the freedom was freedom of movement, financial freedom, freedom of expression, all these different things, right? Oh, wow. So I really started upping my workouts and got hurt. And so I came here, with the phenomenal physical therapy that I had, and one of the things that we discovered was my erector chain. So my back, your
stabilizer muscles,
my
everything.
stabilizers, right, glutes, hamstrings, so forth. They weren't as strong as they needed to be. And I was doing my workout, and I just started laughing. My physical therapist, she's absolutely fantastic. I don't know if I can say her name. You can say her name here.
Kalani.
Yeah, she's great.
She's amazing. Anyway, I started laughing. She goes, "What are you laughing at?" I go, a thought just popped in my head. I said, I often get what I want, even if I'm forced into it, right? Yes. So I was getting freedom of movement because I had gotten injured, which required me to get stronger in areas that I needed to get stronger, that I wasn't working.
That you were doing, the core.
And it goes back to what you said. You know, many of the best things in our life are also the shittiest things in our life.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, true.
And if somebody said, okay, look, Sean, this is what's going to happen over this period of time, but at the end of it, you get all this.
Right.
Most people would go, yeah, I'll sign up for that. But we don't know how long it's going to happen. We don't know what we're going to get. And part of the reason we don't is because we're in control of some of that.
Yeah. And in that, how do you address the setbacks and plateaus that come with that?
I had a student, a PhD student, and he told me that he really struggled in this class. This is his first semester, and he says, hey, I got to tell you, I really struggled in this class.
Uh-huh.
And I said, congratulations. He says, what? I go, congratulations. You struggled, you made it through, and now you know that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right? And so much of it is about our attitude about it, right? We don't want to lose. We don't want to fail. But we also shouldn't be afraid of it. This is the essence of Challenge Point, right? You're going to fail if you're doing it right, 30, 35%, right? That's somewhere around optimal. Well, two things happen. Three things. One, you get better, like
Right.
really get better, so that when you're tested, you perform. Two, you stop fearing failure because it's just part of the process.
Right.
And so then as a result of that, the fear that you think about nervousness. Nervousness is about fear, right? I hope I don't say something wrong. I hope I don't screw up. I hope, et cetera, et cetera. If you've practiced failing, you've practiced dealing with failure 30, 35% of the time, you're like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah. 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 And I realize that, it's so important. Sometimes you need to change your latitude and change your elevation mentally, almost to take yourself out of the box and take a look inside where you can see a little further, where you can see a little bit higher, and some of those things will be answered for you. But that you're going to get uncomfortable doing it. That's the side effect from that.
You have to. But again, discomfort, this will sound like a ridiculous statement. Discomfort doesn't have to be uncomfortable. You think about what you do in the gym. When you've got something that's not comfortable, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Game on, right? That's just because you've chosen that attitude. You could just as well say, oh, this sucks, I'm doing this.
True. Very
Right.
true. Yeah.
There's one of my favorite quotes about this idea, you talked about the self-talk, right? Is if you want to know where you're going to be in 5 years, listen to how you talk to yourself now.
Yeah. She asked me that yesterday. She asked me that, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that got me thinking." What you say? Okay, and but keep going on to that.
Well, in some ways, that's it.
Yeah.
And if we do, I would invite people.
So, because you have that much, I guess, shit to clear up before you can. So, if you're already doing bad, you got to start doing the work. So, you're talking to yourself in a positive way. So, you're in a positive place in 5 years,
Or not.
or
right.
not.
Yeah. Look, most of us don't know what we say to ourselves. So I would invite people to do an audit, a self-talk audit, right? Okay, just for a couple of days, not even for full days, but I'm going to just jot down what some of my thoughts were that I can remember.
I'm laughing because my self-talk is not pleasant.
It's
not
Brutal, right?
It's
Sometimes
not
I'm
good.
hard on myself. I'm really hard on
Yeah.
myself. And when the other people hear me or something, they're like, "Man, you're really tough on yourself." And they think sometimes I'm rude to them, and I'm like, I'm not being rude. This is how I talk to myself. I hold myself to a certain, bar. And if you're not there, I think less of myself. But I am also proud of myself, if you will. I know I'm not doing bad, but I could be way better. Of course, you're never satisfied.
But you know what, Rob? This is interesting to hear you say that, because you are always so pleasant and so encouraging to me every time I come in here. That then to think that you're kicking your own ass in a negative way, it's incongruent, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody else was saying that to you, you probably wouldn't put up with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think that goes back to when I was actually able to identify my value is find joy, and
Yeah.
that was in find joy in good or bad. You know, I was just it's weird that the self talk it was negative. You know, and it would get me through a lot of things, but how much further could I be if the self talk were positive?
And this is the thing. You learned a system that allowed you to achieve certain things, and that's great. And you should be respectful of that and appreciative of that. And I'm not talking about you specifically. I mean this for all of us, right? But we also should understand that it's time to leave it behind. I don't think I've told you guys this before, but most of my analogies, stories have to do with monks for some odd reason. But there are these two monks, and they're going on this epic quest, right? This vision walk. And they're walking through the woods. It's an older monk and a younger monk, and they come up to a river, and the water is rushing, and so they know they can't swim across it. And so they spend about an hour and a half building a raft so that they can raft across. And they get across the river, and the older monk steps off of the raft and just starts walking away. And the younger monk says, "Hold on, we spent an hour and a half building this. We're just going to leave it?" And he says, "We don't need it anymore. Why would we drag it behind us?" Right? And on the surface, that makes such good sense. But so many of us drag the raft behind us, right?
Yeah.
Something we needed to get us from point A to point B, but we don't need it anymore. And we still drag it behind us.
That's interesting.
And
Yeah, get rid of that clutter.
Oh man,
in your head, in your house,
I
and
remember
everything.
things from 10 years ago. I never
you
let
let
it go.
yeah.
But I'm learning how to now.
Yeah.
you know what? I'm interested. You just said that since you were a student 10 plus years
Yeah,
ago.
I'm like Santa Claus with the bag, but the bag is not a present.
I think
Bag
it's
of
also
coal.
changing your circle, your friends, like getting to the point
Oh,
where
yeah.
I think we've gotten rid of a lot of friends. I've changed a lot of
Well, I
things in
got
my life because
it's about 5 friends in total, and they got and the circle got real small. But obviously, you build a business, you don't have time to do a lot of things, but also you'll realize that people that acted like they. I realized that as I got more successful, I became less available to people, but they only sought after me to be available for them. And that was really interesting because I'm thinking back like, man, it just once I became not available to them in that manner, that was it. And it was like, okay, well, you just want me for my availability. And I kind of really thought about that as who I would spend my time with, especially now I have very limited time. And if the mind and the framework has to match, because if not, it's so hard already, working on yourself, but then to try to pick someone up and carry them that ultimately doesn't want or doesn't have the capability of doing that yet could also be very detrimental. And I inadvertently want to help everyone, but that's also not good either.
Yeah, I mean, there is an optimal state of just about everything. There's an optimal state of being generous. There's an optimal state of stress. There's an optimal state of, being introspective. All of these things have an optimal state, and finding what that is for you and how to get there becomes really important. But when you can do that with enough things in your life, now your life becomes at an optimal state.
Yeah. I use the term yes man because, can you do that? Yes man. Can I do that? Yes man. Can I do that? Yes man. Well, some of this no man. And when you're able to make that shift, it's not a no, but I respect myself enough to be like, maybe I'm a little bit too overloaded. Maybe I need some time for myself. Maybe I actually don't want to do that and I've got nothing to prove. And I started learning that as well. Because I just say yes to everything just to show that I could do it.
Yeah.
And
or to just please people. Sometimes it'd be yes just to please others, and it's like I don't really want to be there. Or you find yourself like, what am I doing? This is not benefiting me in any way by being here, just because I wanted to please this person by being at this event or this thing, whatever. So it's saying no to things that aren't of no value to you.
I think
align
that's
with
a
you.
really good point. That's what a lot of successful people do, and have become successful because they're people pleasers. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I'm learning to say yes to me. Right?
Yeah,
I'm not
okay.
saying no to them. I'm saying yes to me,
Right,
and that's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Because you depersonalize it. Even like the situation that you were talking about, there are people who wanted to be in your life because of something that they could gain from you.
Oh yeah,
Right?
Especially when I started working with professional
Yeah.
athletes, it was like,
Yeah, everybody
hey, can you
started
get me
full.
20 tickets to the game? Can you do this? Can you do that? I'm like, no. You
But-
know, it's like,
And so here's the thing, Sean, that I think is interesting about this, because this becomes a pivot point. You or someone in that situation can use your energy to be upset with them, which does you no good.
right.
Or say, well, look, that relationship works for some people. It doesn't work for me. So I'm done.
Yeah. And that brings up to him, like, you got to be careful who you give your gold to,
Yeah.
you know, 'cause
Yeah.
then you got none for yourself. And that brings up, a good topic is how important is, mental performance coaching for long-term health? Because I know for me that it's as much, it's not like people think, oh, I'm going to a therapist or I'm going to my psychologist, and I don't really think that they're studying what you're saying, and they're not teaching you a process of how to learn. They're actually just teaching you what they learn. But mental performance coaching is an investment, but it's on so many deep levels, because I think the person is actually getting the tools, the resources, the assessments, the evaluations on themselves to actually make an improvement. And
I think it's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
so much is going on in here. It's like you got to have it. This is so important.
I've been to the
that a lot of
therapist
people
many
don't.
times, but
Yeah.
but mental performance coaching really has shifted my whole mindset.
True.
I think it comes down to using the right tool for the right job, right? There are people who traditional psychology or psychiatry is enormously beneficial, and there are people that it's not beneficial to. I will tell you that the same's true with mental training, right? So to me, the difference, one of the things about mental training, at least the way that I think about it, is I want to get you're here, you want to get here. How do we get you there the best and most fundamental way? And by fundamental, I mean a way that doesn't crack under
Yes, and
pressure.
sustained.
Right. And to create, movement and systems and that they sustain, right? So, and why you are here doesn't matter so much as what we need to do to get you there. Now, there are other people that why you are here matters, right? And so they want to go backwards and find out what's created that situation. And there's some value in that for some people, and there is not value in that for other people, and vice versa, by the way. I was asked one time by my nephew who's doing a book report, or not a book report, an interview report, and he said, okay, what do you like to do as far as your mental coaching? And I said, I love working with people who have the ability and the desire and will do the work to get better. And he said, what don't you like? And I said, I hate working with people who don't do the work to get better, right?
Yes.
And so, but there may be a reason that, say, a psychologist could get to that I'm not getting to, right? So it's the right tool for the right job. Now, with that said, I do think that mental training is an incredibly powerful tool for many, many people. And because it essentially says, let's let you clear the path, and I'll help you to get to where you want to go. And sometimes that path requires a reframe. Like, for example, what you said is you didn't look at anything in your life as joyous, or there weren't many things that you looked at as joyous, when in fact, you have so many things in your life, right? And so, whereas that helped you to a point, as we've talked about, it hurt you to the next point. I always talk about there's a devil at the next level, right? As you start to try to level up Devil's going to try and kick you back down.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
Maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
You know?
and,
in a week, right now.
Yeah, and the thing is, sometimes you need somebody to help you with that, and because the best in the world at anything, the best in the world have somebody who coaches them.
Absolutely.
Formally or informally, they have somebody who coaches them.
I think it is very important.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't go and just go home and talk, or somebody that's not on your level or doing the same things or the same stresses, they just don't understand. So sometimes that can be more frustrating, trying to get some comfort or some guidance from that person they're not in there.
Yeah.
So having a professional that can relate is huge. I think that's very important.
I think that sometimes the job is to hold up a mirror, right, and point stuff out, because there are so many things we don't know. Like, even if we're introspective, we may not know it. You can get asked a few questions and you're like, oh, that one's actually tough to answer. Why is that tough to answer? And you pull on that thread a little bit, and now you can move forward. And I got to say this, because this was a really important lesson to me. When I was at Auburn, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, Tricia Collins. And the funny part is, I don't know what this conversation was about, but I remember this part that I'm going to tell you in detail. I remember where I was, where we were, and this thing. And I said, yeah, but Trish, if you don't do that, you're never going to get to where you could be. And she said, Mark, you don't understand. Not everybody wants to get to where they could be. And I'm like, what? Like, that literally never occurred to me. But she's right.
Some people,
and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, I can't tell you. I can't tell you how beneficial it has been to have you as my performance coach. And I don't say this slightly, but I absolutely think you're one of the best in the world at what you do.
Thank you.
How do people reach out to hire you?
So I'm hesitating because it's, and just, I probably shouldn't react this way, but I would say to partner with me, right? Rather than just hire me. Like, I don't like the transactional, and I know you didn't mean anything by it, but I don't like a transactional nature. I have a full-time job. I enjoy, and I'm very grateful for that. I get to do coaching, as something that I enjoy to do. And so the people that I coach, like you, I consider it an honor to get to do that, to work
so much
hand in hand with you, right? And so, but as far as reaching out, my email is mark.guadagnoli. If you can spell it, you earn it.
We'll put it on the screen. Don't worry.
You gotta find it.
I still can't spell it.
That's our secret.
But I think probably Instagram, is pretty easy.
Yes.
I think it's just Mark Guadagnoli. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mark Guadagnoli. I'm not super active on
That's all right. So don't get upset if you don't get a reply.
But I think that's probably the best way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how special it was for you to be on, the first podcast.
You're welcome. Before we go, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's been more than a decade since you've been in class. What are some of the things that you remember?
100% the most vivid is going to be the two circles that intersect in the middle of things that you can control, things that you can't control, and then what you want to get better at.
Yeah.
And I fought in that things I can't control so hard. Like, that thing's got the 95% of my energy sucked up in there.
It is the point of frustration, right? Because these are things that, like, somebody's driving down the road and they cut you off.
Yes.
What do you do with it? Do you give them energy or do you let it go? And it's so much. I mean, we haven't talked about this, but this is so important. Human nature. Human nature says that person attacked me, I'm going to attack them.
Yes.
Right? But can we instead choose us? Right? No. That person's not getting my energy. Right? And you just move on from that. And so I think that point, for all of us, if we got to the point where we just controlled what we could control, we let go the things we can't control, holy crap, that would be an energy saver, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
And I also, something that really helped, which I need to do more of, is when I used to meet you for my academic advisor meetings, and we would go on a gratitude walk.
Oh, yeah.
You know, at first I thought, this is the weirdest thing that I've ever done before. But if I look back at that now, boy, do I ever appreciate those, and I'll appreciate them in my life 10 times more. I think you also got me drinking Diet Coke, too.
Got you drinking or stop?
No, we would go and grab a Diet Coke and then walk around the campus. Yeah,
That's great.
but it was beautiful. Who else was doing that? That was so unique, you know.
Yeah.
And it actually felt like I actually got some of your one-on-one time. That just wasn't stuck in an office hour, you know. And that, to me, that was special for me.
That was, you know, those kinds of things, those moments, this is what I mean, it's an honor. Those moments that we get to do those things with people that we care about, that's where joy is, you know, for me. In fact, I have not given that up. I have given up Diet Coke, but I haven't given that up. My daughter shamed me into that some years ago.
Good, you too.
But yeah, I mean, those kinds of things, those are really special to me as well. Yeah, thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember when Sean mentioned you were coming to the gym. He lit up. He was so excited. He was like full circle. He's like, you know. So
well,
we're blessed to have you.
the student becomes the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, you got Phil Big Boots.
That's awesome.
Scary.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, too many more. I'm excited.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.